more the natural thing to do, wouldn't it? But I'm ready to hear that. What I see is a horrible secret life tragedy eventuating in extreme violence and doing great violence to his family. I don't know his family, but I know what suicide does to family and to children. It leaves them with a trauma they can never recover from, or only very incompletely, because it's such a violent act. And how do I know that? I've experienced it. That's how I know. Fortunately for me, not in my own family, but close enough. Beloved friends and girlfriends, and beloved patients, actually, for that matter, too. Okay? So anyway, stop-it therapy. Take a look at it. It makes a mockery of CBT, but it has a point, and it's worth. I think it's worth thinking about. That's the little discussion of the first facet of the boulder that's standing there, with being the theoretical ideas. Okay, but this boulder has other parts to it too that are equally difficult to surmount. And I'm going to start a little bit moving on to the second one, which perhaps unexpectedly to you guys turns out to be Freudian psychoanalysis. Freudian psychoanalysis is really not phenomenological. It's not as bad as behaviorism in ruling out consciousness as something we can even study. It's not like that. Freud and his theories, and Freud's followers and theirs, accepted the idea that consciousness was something real. But phenomenology puts the greatest emphasis on consciousness, on what is on the structure and pattern and thematic organization of awareness itself. That's what it focuses on, and it tries to locate what we're seeing in that context and its history. Freud had a tremendous emphasis instead not on what is present in a person's conscious awareness, but instead on what is missing, suspiciously missing from consciousness. This is related to the Freudian theory of repression. It's a little bit hard to explain, so let me just kind of rattle on and see if you can flow with the ideas. It's not real complicated or anything, but it's just hard to put into words. If one reads Freud on the topic of consciousness, it's as if he thought if something was conscious, it's not a problem and it's not terribly interesting even. He was much more fascinated by what would be missing from a person's conscious awareness, like events that had happened in our lives or feelings that we otherwise could have and do have. If they are missing from our awareness, it suggests something's happened to those feelings or happened to those memories. They've been blocked out of awareness, eliminated from consciousness. The Freudian term for that is repression. Repression means blocking out something from conscious awareness. That's basically it. It's an act, it's a defense mechanism that people use, and it itself is unconscious. That you block it out of your awareness, but you're not aware of doing so. It's the difference between repression and suppression. Like if I have something happening to me and I don't want to think about it, I suppress it and I don't let myself think about it. But I can think about it at any moment if I choose to call it back to mind. Repression's not like that. It happens kind of as an automatic sort of thing. Something vanishes from our awareness and we're no longer aware of ever having thought this, felt this, or of it having happened. That's what repression is. Freud thought the most important thing for a psychotherapist, the Freudian psychoanalytic therapist, as he was creating the field of doing that work, was for us to find out, to plumb the depths of the repressed. That would be the key to understanding mental illness, that the symptoms that people have, that they bring to us for treatment, come from unconscious areas of the mind. In other words, from things that are missing from consciousness. And so what happens in Freud is that there's a kind of diversion from conscious awareness in search for what's repressed and missing, dissociated from awareness altogether. And the complexity and intricacy of conscious awareness itself is left behind, as if it's not a problem, we don't have to worry about that. But phenomenology says the opposite of that. It says the structure of the conscious world of experience is incredibly complex, intricate, requiring detailed, lengthy exploration and analysis, and it's not just not a problem and just a given because something is conscious. people's conscious worlds of experience, in a way, are themselves unconscious. Each of us has our awareness of whatever is, in focus for us at a given moment. But we're not aware of the structure and dimensions and themes that run through our conscious experience all the time. Those are pre-reflective. We talk about this in personality a little bit. So consciousness is a vast, unexplored territory from the standpoint of a phenomenologist, but for Freud it's just a kind of given. We want to look at what's missing completely. Now, getting a little bit more concrete, an example of this in Freudian theory is his approach to dreams. The Freudian approach to dreams and dream interpretation is based on the giant distinction between the manifest content of a dream and the latent content of a dream. And the basic idea there is that the dream that you have when you wake up in the morning is a structure of images that conceals something unconscious, the latent content of the dream. It disguises it, hides it. It's a part of your effort to flee from it. And so Freudian dream interpretation is a matter of unmasking what is hidden, restoring what is missing from consciousness, from the conscious dream image, into consciousness, whatever it is that you've needed to censor and disguise because it's too upsetting, too conflictual, too anxiety-producing. That's kind of the general idea of Freudian dream theory and dream interpretation. This is still real general. I hope you're flowing with me a little bit. Phenomenology has a real different attitude toward dream interpretation. It doesn't suspect the manifest content of the dream as a structure that hides and disguises. It trusts it. It has an attitude of trust toward the manifest. The fact that you trust the manifest content of a dream does not mean that you think it's easy to interpret, because dreams speak a metaphorical, indirect, symbolic language that can be very hard to decode. But the fact that we have to decode it from a phenomenology point of view doesn't come from the fact that the dreamer is disguising it and hiding something from consciousness. It just comes from the language of dreams themselves, which is highly metaphorical, highly symbolic, and really difficult to get a read on many times. So there's a tendency to trust the surface with phenomenology. Now I have to take that back a little bit, because a phenomenologist knows there is such a thing as repression. Like, if you're a phenomenologist, it's not that you don't know that people repress things out of their minds that they can't tolerate being aware of. This is obviously true that they do. Not every person necessarily, but it certainly happens. But how would a phenomenologist approach a case of repression as opposed to a Freudian? A Freudian approaches it to try to open it up. Open up the defense, help the person confront what is there, be with them as they suffer the anxiety, remove the disguise, strip away the concealment. That's kind of this theme of the Freudian method there. A phenomenologist wouldn't be like that. Let's say a phenomenologist found that there were important things blocked out of a person's mind about their history. Like, for example, I'll just make something up, but there are certainly many examples like this. Let's say a young woman blots out from her awareness that her father sexually molested her repeatedly between the ages of 5 and 7 or something. And independent evidence confirms, including even medical reports, that this took place. Okay, so you know with virtual certainty that the historical events took place. Yet it's completely missing from the person's conscious awareness. A phenomenologist would look at the young woman's world, the girl's world, maybe the young woman's world, if this comes to light in the person's adulthood, and ask, what is it about the structure of her world that necessitates the maintaining of a repression of the sexualizing behavior of the father? In other words, it wouldn't just reach for what's hidden. It would ask, what is it in the pattern of the way the person does think, wants to think, needs to think about himself or herself that makes it necessary to exercise their defense mechanism of repression? Maybe you'd find out, for example, that there were long-lasting structures of very idealized images of both parents, and that those idealized images were tied into all kinds of aspects of the person's very identity, so that to remember something atrocious that took place at the hands of the father would shatter a whole world. In order for that world to survive and have any kind of continuity, it's necessary to maintain the repression. So I don't want you to think a phenomenologist doesn't understand repression. He does. He or she does. but the emphasis is always first on the world the person lives in, the world the person maintains. Now, this is all abstract and kind of boring, and you guys are probably dying 1,000 deaths listening to all this, but I want to dive down into one of Freud's cases, and I'm just going to give you a preview of it today. But it's an illustration of how far Freud goes in searching for the hidden factor missing from consciousness, and how it led him, in this case, I think, to miss the manifest message that's in someone's dream. It's the case of what's called it's a case in Freud literature called the Wolfman. I've got it written on the board over there. And Freud wrote 5 or arguably 6 major psychoanalytic case studies. He kind of invented the idea of a case study in these essays. And some of them had colorful names given to them based on a detail of the case. The Wolfman is one of those. Another one that I'm not going to go into is called the Rat Man. I'll tell you why the Rat Man was called the Rat Man. Because he was a young man, maybe 25 years old, came to Freud for therapy because of an obsession he had. What is an obsession? It's a pattern of thinking that keeps happening involuntarily. You can't drive it out of your mind. The melody running through your head is a very mild obsession when you can't get it out of your mind. But obsessions can take all kinds of grotesque forms. This man had an obsession about his fiancée. Long story short, he was engaged to be married to a beautiful young woman whom he claimed to love without limit, with his heart full of nothing but pure feelings of adoration for her. However, he had a certain obsession about her. The obsession was this. Involuntarily, his mind would just track through the following images over and over and over again. He pictured his sweetheart's bare behind in his mind's eye. Trying to drive the thoughts out of his mind, he couldn't do it. They just would keep coming. And then he imagined taking a cage of starving rats and tying it on her behind with the doorway of the cage open against her flesh. Are you with me? So that the rats would eat into her body, and she would be basically eaten alive by these rats. He had read about this as a torture technique in the Crimean War, and he applied it to the woman of his dreams and couldn't stop himself from doing it. Hence the Rat Man. That's why he's called the Rat Man. And Freud's case study is very interesting, and he tries to do a whole theory of what would cause a symptom like that. And it's very interesting. You should read that sometime. And if you ever take psychoanalytic training, which has a section on Freud, and they all do pretty much, you would have to read Freud's great case studies. It's part of the basic training you get in psychoanalysis to do these. So they're interesting. But I'm talking not about that one, but the Wolfman. Why is the Wolfman called the Wolfman? Because of a dream. I'm going to tell you the dream, but not go into the details beyond that, just the dream itself, okay? The Wolfman, again, was a young man, came to Freud because he was having weird feelings of being cut off from the world. I'll talk about those next time, too. But the centerpiece of Freud's analysis of his patient, the Wolfman, 25, 26 years old at the time of entering therapy, very depressed, tremendously upset, really almost on the doorway to suicide, I would say, based on my reading of the case, but found some relief, at least from work with Freud, although it was very complicated, as you'll hear. He was called the Wolfman because of a recurrent nightmare he had had since early childhood. The dream began when he was 3 or 4 years old. It continued all through his childhood and was even continuing during the time of Freud's work with him. So this is a dream, always exactly the same. It's called stereotyped. Stereotyped in this context, that word means fixed elements always occurring in the same order, the same way. Not everyone has stereotyped recurrent dreams, but many of us do. And they're often interestingly related to important traumas that have happened to us, too. There might be other reasons why you would have a recurrent dream like this, too, but whatever. What was the dream? I've drawn a picture on the board that is my version of a picture the patient drew for Freud. This is actually not a bad rendition of what it is, just a kind of schematic little thing. Here's the dream. The patient, age 25, let's say, is having this dream. He had it all the way back, possibly hundreds of times over all the years, so it's a very important window then into his world. In the dream, and he's always a child in the dream, by the way, as he was originally when the dream first appeared. And he's in his bed, and alone in his bedroom. and facing from the bed a window. Suddenly, the window rolls up, the window shade rolls up, so he's looking out upon a winter scene. I think it's night, and it's cold, and there's a tree like 20 or 30 feet back from the window outside, leafless, and in the tree are 5 or 6 pure white wolves, and the wolves are sitting on the branches, and they're staring intently in through the window at the child. And the dream consists of just that: the stillness, the coldness, the silence, the relentless focal staring, and the emotions that go with the dream are escalating terror. He always wakes up from the dream in a fit of terror. And my reading of the terror is that the wolves are ready to pounce. And if they pounce out of the tree and into the bedroom, this kid is toast. Okay? They're going to rip him to shreds and devour him. So it's the dream, on its surface, is a dream of endangerment, of being annihilated by extremely scary, destructive forces. That's it. So you'll see, I want to show you what Freud does with this dream and how far he goes to find the features hidden from consciousness that he thinks are present in this dream. We'll stop there today, though.